Hello guys. Welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. If you're new here, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe so you won't miss out on powerful stories like this one. I still remember the night everything changed. It was one of those evenings where the air felt heavy, not because of the weather but because of the tension inside the house. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner, wiping the kitchen counters the way I always did, when my father, Hector, walked in with a strange seriousness etched on his face. He didn't even look me in the eye at first, which was unusual for him. Then he cleared his throat and said words I'll never forget. "Camila, you're 28 years old now. If you want to stay here, you'll start paying rent. Otherwise, you'll need to move out." At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. For years, I had been the one holding the house together financially. I was the one who bought groceries when no one else could. The one who paid the electricity bill when the lights were about to be shut off. The one who slipped money into Hector's hand when he claimed his paycheck was already stretched too thin. I had contributed without complaint because I believed family looked out for each other. But standing there, being told I suddenly had to pay rent, as though I were just some stranger in his house, something inside me broke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply asked him, "So all that I've been giving, was that nothing?" He didn't answer. He just shrugged and muttered something about everyone having to pull their weight. That was when I realized he had never seen me as his daughter he needed to protect. He had seen me as his lifeline, and now he wanted to drain me further. I went to bed that night restless, staring at the ceiling with memories flooding in. Times when I handed over half my paycheck, so the mortgage could be paid. Times when I gave up buying myself clothes so my younger stepbrother Luis could get his school supplies. Times when I skipped outings with friends because the household bills had to come first. None of it mattered to them. They had been taking from me for so long that they no longer saw it as generosity. They saw it as obligation. By morning, my decision was already made. I wasn't going to fight for scraps of respect in a house where my worth was measured only in how much money I could hand over. I got dressed, left for work, but instead of heading straight into the office, I made a detour. For months, I had been secretly looking at condos, telling myself it was just a future plan. I hadn't expected the future to arrive this abruptly, but when I sat across from the realtor, and she told me the unit I'd been eyeing was still available, I didn't hesitate. I signed the papers, handed over the down payment I'd been saving, and just like that, I secured a home of my own. The rush of freedom that came over me was indescribable. For the first time in years, I was making a decision not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but for myself. I called in a favor from a friend who owned a moving truck, and by that evening, I was carrying boxes into my new place. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. The walls seemed to whisper back to me that I was free, that no one could threaten to kick me out again, that no one could use family as a chain around my neck. I didn't tell Hector in person. I didn't think he deserved that courtesy after what he had said. Instead, I texted him a simple message. "I've moved out. The bills are now yours. Good luck." I put my phone on silent after that, not wanting to hear the barrage of calls that I knew would follow. The first night in my condo, I sat on the bare floor with a single lamp glowing beside me and a takeout container in my lap. I should have felt lonely, but I didn't. Instead, I felt light. I felt like I could finally breathe without carrying the weight of an entire household on my shoulders. The next morning, the storm began. I woke up to dozens of missed calls and angry messages. Hector demanded to know what I meant by "bills are now yours." My stepmother, Teresa, sent me long guilt-ridden texts about how family doesn't abandon each other, conveniently ignoring that they had been abandoning me emotionally for years. Luis sent me nothing, but I noticed on social media he had posted something cryptic about selfish people who think they're better than their family. I ignored them all. At work, my phone buzzed so much that my boss raised an eyebrow, asking if everything was okay. I forced a smile and said it was just family drama. Inside, though, I was boiling. They wanted to guilt me back into the cage I had just broken free from, and I refused to let them. I wasn't their crutch anymore. By the end of the week, I started to hear from extended relatives. My aunt called me, saying Hector had complained that I had abandoned them and left them drowning in bills. She tried to lecture me about duty to family. I cut her off mid-sentence. Did he tell you I've been paying those bills for years while they spent recklessly? Did he mention that when I couldn't buy myself food, I still made sure the fridge at that house was full? She grew quiet, then mumbled something about not wanting to be in the middle. That was when I realized the truth. Nobody was ever going to defend me. If I didn't stand up for myself, no one else would. Every evening, after unpacking boxes and setting up my new condo, I thought about what my life used to be and what it was becoming now. The silence of my place was a blessing. No more Luis blasting music late into the night while I tried to rest for work. No more Teresa barging into my room to borrow things she never returned. No more Hector acting like I owed him my paycheck. Just peace. But peace doesn't come without echoes of the past. I kept replaying the ultimatum in my mind, his voice cold and detached, telling me to pay rent or leave. I realized then it wasn't just about money. It was about control. He wanted to remind me that no matter how much I had given, he could still make me feel small, still make me feel like I didn't belong unless I met his conditions. By leaving, I had taken that power away from him, and deep down, I knew that loss of control was eating at him more than the unpaid bills ever could. The following Sunday, I drove past my old neighborhood on my way to the grocery store. I slowed down as I passed the house, noticing the blinds were drawn shut and the yard looked unkempt. For years, I had been the one mowing that lawn when Hector was too tired. I shook my head and kept driving. That wasn't my responsibility anymore. When I returned to my condo with bags of groceries, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Every dollar I spent was mine. Every choice I made was mine. The chains had fallen, and even though I knew the battle with my family wasn't over, I had already won the first victory. I had chosen myself. That night I sat on my new couch, sipping tea and watching the city lights through my window. I thought about how quickly everything had changed in just 48 hours. One ultimatum had pushed me to do what I'd been too afraid to do for years to claim my independence. And though I knew Hector and Teresa would not let this go easily, I also knew one thing for certain. I was never going back. The silence of my condo didn't last long. Within a week of moving, the storm I had anticipated came in full force. It began with subtle messages, Teresa leaving voicemails filled with dramatic sighs, saying things like, "Camila, we're struggling here. We don't even know if we can keep the lights on without your help. Family doesn't do this to family." Her voice always dripped with guilt, trying to wrap her manipulation in a cloak of maternal concern. But I wasn't fooled. For years she had treated me less like a stepdaughter and more like a paycheck with legs. Then came Hector. His texts weren't guilt-filled, they were outright demanding. "This house is still your home. You owe it to us to contribute." I stared at those words, shaking my head in disbelief. Oh, how did years of sacrificing my own needs for theirs translate into me owing them anything? It was almost laughable, except it hurt too deeply to be funny. Luis stayed quiet at first, but then his voice emerged through another channel: social media. One evening, scrolling through my feed, I saw him post, "Some people think money makes them better than blood. But when karma comes, don't cry for help." The comments were flooded with his friends agreeing, some even throwing insults at me indirectly. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone in our circle knew who he was talking about. It was his way of shaming me publicly, hoping I'd crack under the weight of humiliation. Instead, I grew stronger. I took screenshots of everything, every text, every post, every voicemail. I knew that keeping records was going to be important, though I didn't yet know how much. Something in my gut told me that the worst was yet to come. Days later, the calls escalated. Teresa accused me of turning my back on my little brother. Hector claimed I was heartless for leaving them with bills piling up. I tried to keep my responses minimal, just enough to make it clear I wasn't playing their game. But one evening, as I checked my bank account, I noticed something strange. A credit card I had never opened appeared under my name. At first, I thought it was an error. But when I dug deeper, the transactions made my blood run cold. Gaming equipment, expensive sneakers, even random fast food charges, all things that screamed Luis. My hands trembled as I pieced it together. My stepbrother had opened a credit card in my name, probably using documents he'd found around the house when I still lived there. He must have figured I'd never notice. Rage surged through me, not just at Luis but at Hector and Teresa, because there was no way they didn't know. Or worse, they might have encouraged it. I sat frozen for a while, staring at the screen, feeling that familiar sting of betrayal. It wasn't enough that they had drained me dry for years. Now they were stealing behind my back. But instead of panicking, a strange calm came over me. This was evidence. This was proof of how far they were willing to go. The next day I called the credit card company, reported the fraud, and immediately froze the account. They assured me it would be investigated, and I made sure to get copies of all documents tied to the case. For the first time, I wasn't scrambling to fix their mess out of fear of consequences. I was building a wall between us, brick by brick, paper by paper. When Hector found out I had shut the card down, his rage was volcanic. He left me a voicemail shouting, "How dare you? That was helping this family survive. You're selfish." The words echoed in my ears, not because I believed them, but because of how shamelessly he admitted to using me. They hadn't even tried to hide it. To them, my financial stability was theirs to take, no questions asked. Teresa followed up with another guilt trip, her voice syrupy sweet. "Camila, don't you understand? Luis is just a boy. He makes mistakes. We all do. Can't you let this one go?" I laughed bitterly as I listened. Luis wasn't a child anymore. He was old enough to know right from wrong, old enough to know stealing was a crime. They weren't protecting him, they were enabling him. And they expected me to play along. Instead of answering, I wrote down every word, every date, every detail. I started keeping a folder, digital and physical, because somewhere deep down, I knew they might try to twist the story. They were already painting me as the villain online, the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family. But I wasn't going to let their lies bury the truth. The attacks didn't stop. They grew bolder. One afternoon, I came home from work to find a note slid under my condo door. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Luis's scrawl. The note read, "You think you're safe behind those walls? You'll come crawling back. You need us more than we need you." My hands shook as I held the paper, not out of fear, but out of sheer fury. I was done being their pawn. I filed a police report that night. It wasn't dramatic, it was practical. I wanted it on record. I explained the fraudulent credit card, the harassment, and the threatening note. The officer nodded sympathetically, advising me to keep everything documented. Walking out of that station, I felt lighter, because I had shifted the battle into a place where they couldn't control the narrative. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. Every time I saw Hector's name flash on my phone, my stomach knotted. Every voicemail from Teresa was another stab reminding me how disposable they considered me once I stopped paying their way. Every online post from Luis felt like a slap in the face. But I held firm. I had drawn a line, and I refused to step back over it. In those weeks, I learned how intoxicating freedom could be, but also how lonely it felt when the people you once called family turned into adversaries. I spent evenings sitting by the window in my condo, sipping tea, asking myself how it had all come to this. I never asked to be their savior, but I had been one anyway, quietly and consistently. And now that I refused, they branded me a traitor. But as much as it hurt, it also clarified something. They never loved me for me. They loved what I could provide. And once I stopped providing, their love dissolved. That realization was painful, but it was also liberating. I started redirecting my energy. Instead of answering their endless calls, I spent my time decorating my new place. I painted the walls a warm cream, hung photos I had long kept in boxes, and bought myself a soft couch I could finally relax on without anyone demanding I move to make space. With every nail I hammered into the wall, every new piece of furniture I assembled, I was building a life that was mine alone, free from their parasitic grasp. Yet even as I carved out this new chapter, I knew the storm wasn't over. People like Hector, Teresa, and Luis didn't give up easily. They thrived on control, on dependency, on manipulation. And now that I had severed the chain, they were bound to grow more desperate. What I didn't know was just how far their desperation would go, or how ready I was, finally, to face them without fear. I was in the middle of setting up some new curtains when the knock came. It wasn't the polite kind, It was the kind that rattled the door frame, heavy and insistent. My chest tightened instantly because I already knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. On the other side stood Hector, his face already red with anger, Teresa hovering behind him with her arms crossed tightly, and Luis, who leaned against the wall with that smug smirk I had grown to despise. I didn't want to open the door, but I also knew that running wasn't my style anymore. I cracked it just enough to face them, my hand firmly gripping the chain lock. Hector wasted no time. "Camila, enough of this nonsense. You need to reinstate the utilities and pay what you owe this family. Do you think you can just walk away after everything we've done for you?" I blinked at him slowly, the audacity of his words almost knocking the air from my lungs. I owed them? After years of being their safety net, after discovering Luis's fraud, after being smeared on social media? A laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "What exactly do you think I owe you, Hector? Because I've been paying bills in that house since I was old enough to work. You've drained me dry and still dare to call me selfish." Teresa pushed forward, her voice sharp and shrill. "You're tearing this family apart. You can't just abandon us like this. The water bill, the electricity, it's piling up. Don't you care that we're struggling?" Something in me snapped then. I opened the door wider, stepping into the hallway, facing them all without a shred of hesitation. "Struggling? Do you mean the same way I was struggling when I begged for help, and you told me to figure it out on my own? Or the way you watched me skip meals to cover your mortgage? No, Teresa. I do not care about your struggles anymore. Because every struggle you're drowning in now is one you created by bleeding me dry." Luis finally spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're better than us now because you've got a little condo? Don't forget, you're still blood. You'll come crawling back when you realize you can't do this alone." I turned my eyes on him, letting silence stretch between us until his smirk faltered. Then I said evenly, "Funny you're talking about blood, but last I checked, blood doesn't steal. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the credit card? Did you think I wouldn't trace every transaction back to you?" His face was drained of color. Teresa gasped and Hector barked his name, but the damage was already done. The truth was out in the open, and the fear in Luis's eyes was confirmation enough. "I've documented everything," I continued, my voice steady, calm, deadly clear. "Every text, every voicemail, every fraud attempt. You wanted me to be your safety net, but you forgot something I learned to protect myself. I'm not the same girl you pushed around for years." Hector tried to recover, his voice booming through the hallway. "You think you can threaten us? We're family. You can't just throw us away." That was when I smiled, not out of joy, but out of finality. Families don't exploit each other. Family doesn't treat one person like a bank account. You didn't throw me away tonight, Hector. You threw me away years ago. The first time you let me carry all your burdens while pretending you were the victim. I'm just finally accepting it." Their shouts followed me as I stepped back inside and closed the door, locking it behind me. I leaned against the wood for a long moment, listening to the muffled sound of Hector's anger until it eventually faded down the hallway. My body shook, but not from fear. It was release, the kind that comes when you stop running from your truth. Days later, the final blow arrived, not for me but for them. I was sipping coffee one morning when an email pinged in my inbox. At first I thought it was spam, but as I scanned it, my eyes widened. It was a foreclosure notice for the house they had fought so hard to keep afloat by draining me. The email was mistakenly copied to my old address, and the cruel irony made me laugh out loud. They were about to lose everything. I printed the email and drove straight to their house, not because I wanted to gloat, but because I needed them to see that their actions had led to this moment. When Hector opened the door, his face gaunt with stress, I handed him the paper without a word. Teresa hovered behind him, her eyes darting nervously. Luis wasn't there, but I didn't care. "What is this?" Hector demanded, scanning the page. "It's the end," I replied softly. "You wanted me to carry this house on my back. You wanted me to fund Luis's mistakes. You wanted me to play savior forever. But look where it got you. This isn't my problem anymore. It's yours. I won't be your life raft, not now, not ever." Teresa's eyes brimmed with tears, but I didn't let myself soften. I had cried too many nights in that house to fall for it again. I turned and walked back to my car, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders with each step. As I drove away, I felt a profound calm settle inside me, for the first time in And as painful as it was to accept that my family would rather destroy me than support me, it was also the truth I needed to build a new life, one that belonged only to me. I arrived back at my condo, unlocked the door, and let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. The world outside was still chaotic, but here I had peace. I looked around my little home at the curtains I had hung, the photos on the walls, the small victories of independence, and I smiled. They had tried to break me. They had tried to own me. Instead, they had forced me to rise, and I wasn't going back.
Moral lesson.
In life, family is supposed to be a source of love, support, and protection. But sometimes the people closest to us forget that love is not built on exploitation. This story reminds us that boundaries are not betrayal. They are survival. Camila learned that giving until you have nothing left is not loyalty. It is self-destruction. And when she finally chose herself, she discovered strength she never knew she had. If you've ever felt trapped under the weight of other people's expectations, remember this. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away from people who use you, even if they are family. Love cannot be proven by sacrifice alone. It must be mutual, balanced, and rooted in respect. To anyone watching, let this be encouragement. Stand firm in your worth. Do not let guilt chains hold you down. True freedom begins the moment you decide your life belongs to you. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and comment below what lesson resonated with you most.